Russia strikes Kyiv, Iran funeral chaos, China missile test, and Venezuelan quake horrors. Greetings, humanity. Let's grok the news. We cover the world's headlines, but first, a deep dive into the most important story in the world today. Dateline: Kyiv, Ukraine. Russian forces launched a deadly overnight barrage of missiles and drones on the Kyiv region, killing at least 11 to 14 civilians and damaging some apartment buildings. This marks the second major attack on the Ukrainian capital in less than a week, coming just ahead of a critical NATO summit in Turkey, where President Donald Trump is expected to press allies on burden sharing and the future of the conflict. Ukrainian officials say the strikes targeted residential zones, with rescue teams still searching rubble for survivors. President Volodymyr Zelenskyy warned that Russia is intensifying efforts to seize momentum on the battlefield, particularly around Konstantinivka in the Donetsk region. Ukraine reports growing shortages of interceptor missiles as Russian attacks become more frequent and sophisticated. The timing appears designed to send a message before NATO leaders convene. Trump is scheduled to meet with Zelenskyy and other key figures during the summit. European allies are pushing for firmer, long-term commitments, while questions remain about the scale of future U.S. support. The NATO Secretary General has called the attacks a direct challenge to the alliance's eastern flank. Analysts see this as part of a broader Russian strategy to weaken Ukrainian resolve and test Western unity. Moscow has denied targeting civilians, claiming the strikes hit military objectives. Independent verification remains difficult amid the fog of war. The attacks come as Ukraine continues drone strikes deep into Russian territory, including recent hits on oil terminals near St. Petersburg. Both sides are locked in a war of attrition that has already claimed hundreds of thousands of lives and redrawn European security architecture. Western intelligence reports suggest that Russia is reconstituting forces for potential new offensives, even as its economy strains under sanctions. Ukraine, meanwhile, faces manpower challenges and is relying heavily on Western weaponry and financial aid. Any perceived wavering in NATO support could embolden Moscow. That is the fear. At the upcoming summit, leaders will grapple with long-term strategy, sustained military aid, potential paths to negotiation, and deterrence against further Russian aggression. Trump has repeatedly signaled interest in ending the war, describing it as a drain on American resources while stressing the need for European nations to increase their own defense spending. The human cost remains staggering. Entire families were lost in last night's strikes. Hospitals in Kyiv are treating the wounded as power outages complicate recovery efforts. International condemnation has been swift, but concrete action beyond the usual statements has been limited. This escalation underscores the fragility of the current stalemate. With winter approaching, July is not even over, but you've got to think about these things if you're going to conduct a useless war. With winter approaching, both sides are racing to improve their positions. The world is watching whether NATO can present a united front or if divisions, particularly over burden sharing and negotiation red lines, will create openings for Russia. For Ukraine, survival depends on maintaining Western support. Without it, Ukraine would have already completely lost. For Europe, the conflict represents an existential test of post-Cold War security. This observer believes that Europe is living in the past. And as for the United States, well, it forces a reckoning with its role as global security guarantor at a time of domestic priorities and great power competition with China. The coming days in Turkey may prove decisive in shaping the war's next phase. Well, this observer has been quite honest about his opinion. I think that we need to come to terms with Russia and stop supplying the Ukrainian mafia with the means to resist the Russian mafia. Draw the lines and let's have peace for a few years. I'm Robert Gardner, using GROK each weekday to truthfully summarize the news. Well, seasoned, of course, with my own opinions. We review a roundup of the most critical reports in the world right after this. M.S. Gardner, that's my lovely, brilliant wife. Well, she's also the author of Wolf's Bane, a serious, modern take, a dark look at an old fairy tale. It's a page-turning Southern Gothic story for adults. Wolf's Bane, available now at thecuriousauthor.com or amazon.com. Now we grok the news with headlines from around the world. Dateline Tehran, Iran. Millions of Iranians have filled Tehran streets for the opening of a 6-day state funeral for slain Supreme Leader Ayatollah Ali Khamenei. Mourners chanted anti-American and anti-Israel slogans, of course, while carrying portraits of his son Mojtaba, the new supreme leader who has not appeared publicly since the war began. Authorities have imposed heavy security across multiple cities as the procession heads towards Qom and the eventual burial in Mashhad. The events come months after Khamenei's death in the recent war. Dateline the Pacific Ocean. China conducted a rare submarine-launched ballistic missile test in the Pacific. This comes shortly after Australia and Fiji signed a new mutual defense pact explicitly aimed at countering Beijing's regional ambitions. The launch has drawn condemnation from Canberra, Wellington, and Tokyo. Analysts see it as a direct signal amid heightened great power competition in the Indo-Pacific. Dateline Caracas, Venezuela. The death toll from twin earthquakes in Venezuela has now climbed past 3,000, with rescue operations ongoing amid repeated aftershocks. International teams, including Israeli search and rescue units, continue working in the devastated areas. This disaster struck as the country marked its independence anniversary, exposing weaknesses in infrastructure and emergency response. Dateline Ankara, Turkey. Turkish authorities have arrested dozens of opposition figures and critics in a major pre-NATO summit crackdown. President Erdogan's government says that the move targets security threats. The summit will feature high-stakes meetings between Trump, Zelenskyy, and regional leaders as the alliance grapples with burden sharing and the war in Ukraine. Dateline Manila in the Philippines. The impeachment trial of Vice President Sara Duterte has formally begun amid large rival protests in Manila. The lawmakers accuse her of corruption, while supporters call the proceedings politically motivated revenge. The high-profile case could reshape Philippine politics and its delicate balancing act between the United States and China. Dateline, the southwest of France. French authorities have evacuated thousands as massive wildfires rage out of control in the southwest. Extreme heat and strong winds have hampered firefighting efforts, with the Tour de France route also impacted. Officials linked the blazes to modern climate-driven challenges affecting southern Europe this summer. Well, let's just say it. There's been a heat dome over Europe and over the United States. In this observer's meteorological opinion, this is due to the powerful El Nino currents in the Pacific Ocean. Dateline Washington, D.C. The United States marked its 250th anniversary with fireworks, flyovers, and record heat that contributed to at least 19 to 25 suspected deaths in New Jersey alone. President Trump used the occasion to deliver speeches, blending celebration with some sharp political messaging. Dateline Vienna, Austria. OPEC has agreed to increase monthly oil production starting in August as part of efforts to manage global supply. The move by 7 member countries comes amid fluctuating energy prices and geopolitical tensions affecting the markets. Analysts are watching potential impacts on gasoline costs during peak summer demand. Dateline London, the United Kingdom. Sky has reached a major deal to acquire broadcaster ITV for up to £2.1 billion in a bid to strengthen its position against streaming services. The transaction, requires regulatory approval and could significantly reshape British media landscapes and content production. Dateline New York. A seaplane carrying passengers made an emergency hard landing in the East River near Manhattan. All aboard were rescued with only minor injuries reported. The U.S. Coast Guard and local authorities responded swiftly. Federal investigators have launched a full probe into the cause, of course. Dateline New Delhi. India has ordered Meta to remove advertisements promoting child sexual abuse material across its platforms. This observer wonders why any nation would have to order the Facebook company to stop promoting child sex abuse and taking money for it. The government described the content as a serious threat, requiring immediate action. Meta stated it is cooperating fully with authorities while defending its existing content moderation systems, which fail to protect children from sexual abuse. Dateline Coney Island. Gunfire at a July 4th gathering near Coney Island Beach wounded 8 people, including 4 children. New York police are actively searching for the shooter. This incident occurred in a heavily populated area during the holiday festivities. No deaths have been reported so far. Dateline Denver, Colorado. A fast-moving wildfire southwest of Denver has destroyed more than 160 structures and forced thousands to evacuate. High winds have challenged containment efforts. Emergency officials warn dry conditions could prolong the threat to the surrounding communities. Dateline Jakarta, Indonesia. Authorities there have identified 14 additional suspects in an expanding daycare sexual abuse investigation, bringing the total to 27. The case has horrified the public and triggered widespread calls for systemic reforms to protect children. This observer hopes that you are noting how many of these child sex trafficking networks there are throughout the world. They could not exist without being promoted, aided, abetted, and protected by governments around the world from the top to the bottom. Dateline Colombo, Sri Lanka. Clashes inside a major Sri Lankan prison have left at least 19 people dead. Officials say the violence involved rival inmate groups. The incident has highlighted chronic overcrowding and management issues within the country's prison system. Dateline, the Gaza Strip. Hamas is reportedly preparing to transfer governance responsibilities in Gaza to a new administration, one backed by the Trump administration. Palestinian residents express mixed feelings of cautious hope and deep skepticism about any lasting change on the ground. Dateline Johannesburg, South Africa. Nigeria says 2 of its nationals were killed in South Africa amid a surge in anti-migrant violence. The incidents have strained diplomatic ties between the two nations. Nigerian officials are demanding better protections for their citizens living and working in South Africa. Dateline London. Britain has introduced stricter rules on overseas political donations in an effort to limit foreign interference in its democracy. Lawmakers say that the changes are essential for national security. Critics worry about potential impacts on legitimate international engagement. This observer wonders why anyone would think that any kind of foreign money in a political election could possibly be okay, wherever it's from. Dateline Canberra. The Australian Space Agency says that the mysterious so-called spaceballs, metallic spheres that washed up on Queensland beaches, are pressure vessels from a rocket that re-entered Earth's atmosphere. The objects were found on Forest Beach and are believed to be debris from some recent space launch. Authorities are working with international authorities to identify the exact source. They might check with Mel Brooks. I thank you for listening. Please join me tomorrow to once again grok the news. I'm Robert Gardner. Godspeed and God bless.